Okay, and the slides. Just need to put the slides on. And hello, everyone, dear 𝑔reenRWA members and participants. Welcome to our webinar dedicated to the post-28 voluntary carbon market. I'm Olivier, chair of 𝑔reenRWA and your moderator for this Outlook. Today, we will delve into the complex world of carbon credits, focusing on the voluntary market, its key players, implications of Article 6, we'll talk about that later, and future outlooks. To discuss this, especially in the context of the COP28, we're honored to have three experts with us today. 𝙒𝙧𝙚𝙧𝙗𝙤𝙧𝙗𝙤, she's a coordinator of climate and sustainable finance at the French Development Agency. It's a bilateral development bank responsible for implementing France's public development aid. 𝙒𝙧𝙚𝙧𝙗𝙤𝙧 is an expert in public policy dialogue on sustainable finance and climate issues. We have also Julien Jacob, carbon finance advisors at Pure Earth, Finnish company and carbon credit standard focused on permanent sequestration solutions. And finally, we have Adrien Pages with us, the CEO of Morpho, an innovative French company in large-scale reforestation. You will have a few minutes to introduce yourself, in a deeper way, dear participants. But first, a word about 𝑔reenRWA, our association, which is now into its fourth year. Just to make sure you know where we're coming from here. So in 𝑔reenRWA, our role is to be a driving force for the green transition in the financial sector. Our mission is to encourage banks to adopt innovative approaches in calculating the capital required for bank loans in close collaboration with the regulators and central banks. So with the support of our members, both corporates and individuals, we've made significant strides in 2023 with regulators and are actively engaging this year with the European and local public institutions to calibrate and test our mathematical approach to climate risk on banking books. And of course, as part of our educating the market and our members, we monthly gather together around specific topics, such as today, the voluntary carbon market. So this market enables companies and individuals to offset their carbon emissions by purchasing credits from projects that reduce or capture greenhouse gases. Currently valued at over $2 billion, this market is expanding rapidly, or you should say exponentially, because depending on who you ask, it could grow anywhere between 40 and 250 billion USD by 2030, indicating, of course, a global shift towards sustainability and more ambitious goals. It's particularly beneficial for corporations to build their net zero 2050 commitments, including banks, our main counterparts here, leveraging this market for their NZBA commitments. However, maintaining the market integrity and transparency remains a core challenge, ensuring each credit genuinely contributes to our collective environmental goals. So let's now start the discussion, and I will let each of you, dear speakers, to introduce themselves and give your own view on this summary, if you will. 𝙒𝙧𝙚𝙧𝙗𝙤𝙧, shall we start with you? You're muted.
Yeah. Thank you, Olivier, for the introduction, and welcome for the attendance. So I will jump directly toward Article 6, and I will try to not give you a lot of jargon there and to be really clear about it. So what is Article 6? I think part of you are familiar maybe with the CDM, the Clean Development Mechanism, which is the existing UN carbon mechanism.
Sorry, 𝙒𝙧𝙚𝙧𝙗𝙤𝙧, sorry to interrupt. Just say a word about you and the AFD for now. We'll come to Article 6 in a minute.
Yeah, okay, very quickly then. Okay, so I'm 𝙒𝙧𝙚𝙧𝙗𝙤𝙧 from Agence Française de Développement. and I'm a coordinator for sustainable finance and climate finance. And I have been, in fact, following the discussion on Article 6 on at the COP28 in Dubai. And at AFD, actually, just to give you some context, we are working with mostly developing countries on those topics. And which are very quickly expanding from the supply side and from, globally speaking, carbon strategies and the carbon mechanism, which goes beyond voluntary and compliance markets.
Thank you, Jediga. And Adrian, if you want to say a few words also about you and Morpho, be happy to hear about you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So yeah, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Morpho. Morpho is a Franco-Brazilian startup that is doing ecosystem restoration at scale and forest monitoring. Basically, the idea is to be able to plant the best possible forest based on biodiversity, environmental impact, carbon sequestration, and social impact, and all this at scale. So we are not talking about treating a few hundred hectares, but hundreds of thousands of hectares in the next years and decades. Quite a challenge. And we are working for part of our job with the carbon industry, providing them very good quality forest. So this is why I'm in this discussion today.
Thank you. And finally, Julien, maybe if you introduce yourself before we speak about the market.
Sure. So hi, everyone. I work with Puro Earth. We are a platform to certify carbon removal activities. So essentially, certification is at the core of our activities, meaning that we assess projects who conduct carbon negative activities against a set of rules that are defined by Puro Earth. And the positive outcome of this assessment results in the issuance of certificates. So certificates, each of them testify for the removal, the permanent removal of a ton of CO2 from the atmosphere, which is stored durably for at least 100 years. We are trusted by renowned buyers in this market. So for example, Microsoft or Swiss Re or Shopify or Stripe are usual users of our credits. We are ICRO accredited, and we work a lot towards the buildup, basically, of this ecosystem, which is still very much nascent.
Thank you, Jean. And maybe, as this, to start the conversation and for the benefits of all the participants, whether you're green RWA members or outsiders, can you give us a clear understanding of the market structure, the players, and also how it compares or completes the compliance market of carbon credits?
Sure. So, well, carbon markets exist because you have entities, which are companies or individuals or governments, that are willing to pay other entities to have an effect on greenhouse gases. And this willingness to pay, it can come from a legal obligation or from a voluntary action. When it comes from a legal obligation, it is typically assorted with a centralized, well-functioning mechanism, which is operated by a state or region or an intergovernmental body. So an example of that is the EU ETS. But a lot falls outside of this framework. For example, you have entities which are not subject to a legal obligation to pay for impact, but are willing to do so. Or you have entities that are obliged to pay, but want to go beyond what this legal obligation is. And on the other side of the market, you have activities that could be implemented right away and have an effect on climate change, but are missing monetization routes for those activities to move forward. And so whenever we are within those prerogatives, the VCM fills the gaps. So the VCM basically builds capacity, it occupies the space that the compliance markets are living out, and it brings a scalability, a path to scalability for the carbon markets. it's important to maybe also clarify that, so the VCM lives next to compliance markets, and it will continue to do so. And I'm sure during this webinar, we'll discuss compliance mechanisms, but the VCM occupies gaps where there is no compliance market to enable climate action where it's possible.
Thank you. Can you maybe to continue on this topic a little bit at the end? Can you give us a little bit a few figures and a reality check around the market size? You know, around how does supply faces demand in a way? To understand how fast the figures I gave could become real.
But actually, I think like that's clear that demand is growing, but it's still facing like a few challenges in order to really be able to scale and to have a good alignment between like offer and demand on the market. And I'm mostly talking in this part on the voluntary carbon market, but I think like the points are like a lot of recognized certifiers are under criticism, and there is some new players such as Puro, but with like an existence that is not so long. So I think like the market is still building and has been changing a lot during the last 2 years. And I think, in fact, we still need some changes in the categorization and the regulation of the demand and the offer. And I think the Giga will talk about this after. But so like the growth is constant. The price, the global price also is growing. But so far, it would be like there is still some uncertainty to know if we will reach what has been announced as like growth perspective globally. So I would say like it's under construction, and this is also why what is very interesting is that you find places and opportunity for some high quality project to show themselves and to find like a high-end customer on the other hand.
Okay, and just to give a number, how do you see the size of the high quality carbon market or carbon offer? In fact, what capacity do we have there? For if you take your example of reforestation.
I would say it's for now it's small. We are talking about a few hundreds millions, you know. So it's still a very small market.
Interesting. Okay, got you. So now, Giga, coming to the context also and preparing for discussion around the COP28, where you have participated in the negotiation of Article 6 and 4, 6.2, 6.2 and 6.4. Sorry, can you give us first a little presentation around this Article 6 and how important it is for to build properly the voluntary carbon market?
Yeah, thank you, Olivier. And in fact, Article 6 was one of the most awaited negotiations beside the loss and damage and global stocktake at the COP 2028. And actually, it came with in a year and even in many years of a lot of criticism and scandals around the voluntary carbon market. So people were expecting those markets to go down. But at the end of the day, they received a very strong endorsement from key participants such as John Kerry, Mike Carney, and Aja Banga from the World Bank. So it was really central at the COP. And the negotiations actually was judged as, was considered as disappointing, the outcome of the negotiations, except Article 6.8, I will come back to it later, which reached an agreement. And even though we have all these contexts, experts and observers are expecting strong growth on the voluntary carbon market, supported by carbon dioxide removals and non-nature-based credits, as explained by Julien. And hopefully a very high integrity on the nature-related carbon credits, as a company as Adrien is working on, and so this is hopeful on those markets. So just to come back to the Article 6, what is Article 6? So for those who are familiar with the UN mechanism, we have the Clean Development Mechanism, which came at the Kyoto Protocol. So it lasted for more than 10 years, and mainly with projects on renewable energies under the CDM, captured mostly by India, China, and East Asia. And so Article 6 came after the Paris Agreement, within the Paris Agreement, and it has been under negotiations for many years, and it reached its first, I would say, positive outcome at Glasgow, and then now at Dubai, everyone was waiting to have a final negotiation outcome on that. So just to explain, Article 6 provides an accounting framework for countries to operate voluntary and transfer mitigation results, right? And to achieve their NDCs. This is important to keep it attached to the NDCs. So under Article 6, countries can transfer carbon credits earned from reduction of GHG emissions, without one thing which is important. The framework aims at avoiding double counting, which was one of the criticism on voluntary carbon market. And so a country, for example, who delivers carbon credits may authorize the transfer of the mitigation outcome with a corresponding adjustment, which is the jargon we use under this article, toward its NDC, or transfer it to the NDC of the country who is buying. So this is very, very
NDC being the nationally determined contribution. So basically, the goal that the countries would commit to.
Yeah, thank you, Olivier. And when maybe some of the people have heard about this transfer, which happened very recently from Thailand to Switzerland on electric buses under Article 6.2. So it was very recent. So the outcome was transferred to the NDC of Switzerland, right? And it happened under this 6.2 mechanism. So I will try to go very quickly and explain the three sub-mechanisms of Article 6. Is really important. So we have this 6.2, which is cooperative approach and voluntary bilateral exchange between two or more countries. The unit is what we call ITMO, internationally transferred mitigation outcomes. I think it's an important term to keep in mind for people who are interested in Article 6. And actually, there is a very limited international oversight from the UN, because the UN review comes ex post and not during the process. So the methodology is under the supervision of the parties of the countries. It's very important to keep that in mind. And there is no global registry. And then you have Article 6.4, which is the market mechanism, which is aimed to open carbon market to all the countries, to make it democratic, to democratize the carbon market for all the countries. And it's a centralized market, which is under a UN supervisory body. It's very important to keep this in mind as well. And it will be subject to UNFCCC rules, which is under the supervisory body. And one important thing was to set up this common methodology on removals, especially on removals, and not only, and to have a kind of common methodology. And one other important point, a common registry. It's very technical, but the registry is a very important point as well, especially for market participants, how to get, I will come later to that as well. But keep in mind who is supervising Article 6.2, 6.4, and then you have 6.8, which is non-market approaches. And I will not develop this, but I will be very happy to come further to explain this. And I think we have a lack of time, so I will not go further on 6.8. So what was at stake at the COP? So the supervisory, everyone was observing supervisory body, waiting for the outcomes coming from the supervisory body on the methodologies. What are the methodology requirements on removal activities? To get guidance, clear guidance, we, as indicated by Julia and Adrien, we have many standard certifiers. It's a jungle, really. So how to come with a common methodology on removals to address the additionality, the permanence, the risk of reversal, and the monitoring period as well. Should we monitor over 20, 50 years? What is important? And from our opinion, from AFD at least, we do think that it was a good thing to not reach maybe an agreement as quick as possible, because would have been locked in maybe a methodology which is not sufficiently good. So we agree that it's really difficult to reach a universal agreement on a common methodology on removals. So, and at the end of the day, the technical discussion turned to a political discussion between, I would say, the US and the Europe with regard to registries and methodology for more transparency, for more stringent methodologies, etc. But you can, I will stop here. But yeah, this is on a nutshell what happened around Article 6, but we will come later to more details. Thank you.
Thank you, Gigi. Yeah, and I think, taking it from there, and I understand it was a disappointing call from that perspective. How do you see things shaping up from there, Julien? And what are the next steps and dynamics that could reinforce this market, which is so necessary for the net zero target?
Yeah. So, well, our Article 6 seeks to facilitate trading of removal and reductions across internationally, so that everyone can basically meet their climate targets in a cost-efficient manner. In parallel to that, you have the voluntary market, which already enables corporates or individuals to buy offsets on a voluntary basis. And the two, again, live next to one another. With Article 6, because it's a centralized mechanism that is under a UN framework, it has a potential to bring more credibility and structure to carbon markets. And we expect it will learn from the voluntary market for its implementation. But until they are agreed, this Article 6.4, which may not be done within 2 years, we don't know exactly when, the VCM will still stay under the spotlight as to the market where climate action happens for both project developers that are willing to monetize their activities and buyers that are willing to go beyond legal obligation to finance climate action.
Interesting. So you keep a positive view on the dynamics for the voluntary carbon market under the latest developments of the code implementation.
So it's a pie that is to grow 100-fold, 1,000-fold. So even if the voluntary carbon market decreases its share because some of its activity are transferred to compliance market or under 6.4, the cake gets so much bigger that the VCM still has a huge role to play. And as I said at the beginning of this webinar, the VCM is also pioneering, right? It brings new methodologies to the market. It brings new actors, new buyers. It brings new synergies that then will be taken up by the UN for the better good in a centralized manner. But still, the VCM does have a huge role to play in the next decades to pioneer, to bring new ideas, and to enable impact where compliance markets don't enable that.
Okay, thank you for this positive view. And Adrian, what do you see on your side? What are your expectations for the next 5-10 years for the market growth?
No, it's a little bit what I was saying. I think what is very important is that we have like right now there is I think a big maturity and a big growth of the certification process and of the products that are put on the market. A lot because there's a lot of scandal, but also because there is more and more efforts, and that the level of expectation from buyers is more important. So that's a very good point. I think on the other hand, now we need a change of the buyers as well, and maybe a regulation of the buyers. We see some of them that are at the forefront, mainly in the American tech industry, by the way, but who are putting real money on the table to be able to develop techno-based project and new technologies, but also to allow to do a very good natural-based carbon project. And I think that's a very important point, is that we should focus on quality, but also put the right price on quality. And this is something that I would expect if we don't want to keep as we have been doing the last 10 years, which has not been that useful. We should really understand this, because it's not about compensating some carbon aspect. It's contributing to a big change in our societies, and carbon is a way to monetize it, but it's not the only point about it. And I think this is very important. And we are not, of course, carbon could be a commodity, but it's not really a real commodity. You know, there is many impact, and it could have very many positive impact if we do it right. So I'm really inspecting this aspect. But I think for this, the market needs also a lot of education. We need to understand that it's not going to be just a line at the end of your accountability result, and that you need to understand all consequences behind. But I think if we validate this, the growth is going to be very interesting, and it can be one of the most powerful tools to address our climate change and all the challenges that it will present in the coming years. The other point is that so far we don't have any other alternative, so I really hope it's going to work. It's very important. But we are all working on it, so I don't know why we should not succeed. Of course not. So yes, that's a little bit my view, but difficult to say what will happen in the 10 coming years.
But just to put things in perspective, from the ballpark figures I have in mind, we said earlier that the market would grow up to $250 billion in 2030, which is tomorrow, coming from 2 billion, and that represents probably 10 to 20% of what the annual investment we need to achieve the net zero transition. So it's 10 to 20% of the money needed every year. So it's significant anyway. So that shows that we cannot achieve net zero transition without the carbon market, whether it's good or bad. Sorry, Julien, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting, because we don't tend to count as dollars, but as tons into what is expected and what should happen. And so I'm obviously from the removal side of things, and the removal side of things, we have those IPCC graphs that help us explain things in a bit clear manner. So basically, our emissions for a net zero world in 2050 need to decrease by 80 to 90% compared to what they were in pre-industrial level. So those will, if today we're at, I don't know, 45 billion tons emitted annually, something like this, of CO2 equivalent, this should get down to 5 to 10, let's say. And then if we want to be net zero, that means that we have to remove every year 5 to 10 billion tons from the atmosphere. This is if we manage our reduction targets. which we're not on currently, you know, on a good track for. So yeah, instead of saying, you know, this is the value of that market, we can think also about if removal credits have to make up for this 5 to 10 billion minimum, meaning we start achieving our reduction targets, then this is basically the size of that market every year. Then the price of a ton, really hard to say what it's going to be. Hopefully it will, you know, homogenize to a sub $100 per ton, but hard to say at this stage. But yeah, so that's how we see the market today.
So yeah, it's interesting to talk a little bit about the price, because when we prepared this roundtable, you know, I was speaking about my own net zero compensation, or my compensation that I had to do, because you know I have to admit and publicly that I fly from time to time, and when you start to evaluating your CO2 emissions and find some credit to compensate, you see how disparate the prices are, ranging. You can buy anything from $5 to $100. So I think, Giga, what is your view on what you call the price discovery and this visible price differences in the market between all the projects?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Olivier. I think, yeah, there is one key point we are insisting on AFD. We are doing a lot of work with academics on, because a lot of effort has been pushed on put on the integrity of the supply. But what about the integrity of the demand? Which is a very important point. And unfortunately, for example, a common announcement has came at the COP28 only, so it came really late. And the supervisory body of Article 6.4 has put in its agenda the integrity of the demand, but it was not on its key tasks, which was on the supply side, right? But we must agree that a market is about supply, is about demand, and about market infrastructure. This is why I was mentioning the registry point, which is very important on transparency, confidentiality, and as an economist, we know how price market is price discovery is coming, the process of price discovery. All those points are important. This is why I was insisting on the registry thing, and on the integrity of the demand side as well. And I would add one point which is important. Actually, the supervisory board was also, I think, in a difficult position, because they cannot use an opinion from the IPCC, for example, on CDR, on I call it, Julien, sorry for that, technological carbon credits. But so the IPCC in this weekend came to an agreement to put this on his working agenda, to get a reference works on the CDR, carbon dioxide removals, and CCS, CCUS, carbon capture and usage, etc. And I think it's very important to have science behind that. And I think it's important to be patient, and to acknowledge that it's very technical issues, and to get a market on such product which is not a tangible commodity. And so this is my very broad view.
Thank you. Adrien, do you want to shed any light around this the price discovery and how different the price can be from one project to another? Does it make sense? Given that in the end, when you look at it from my point of view, for example, I mean, 1 ton of CO2 is 1 ton of CO2.
But I cannot really say this, because the thing is, like, I'm gonna give you like a very simple example. So you say, I'm gonna take a nature-based carbon credits, because this is what I know the best. But okay, you say 1 ton of CO2. You have 1 ton of CO2 that is coming from a forest, a productive forest of eucalyptus, and you have 1 ton of CO2 coming from a native forest that's gonna like keep here, be kept here until we don't know when. One forest is very sensible, is not a forest, basically, because you only have one type of tree, so you cannot have like other plants, you're not gonna have animals, and it can deregulate water cycle, and is not gonna have like a great impact on global ecosystem and environment. So you have 1 ton of CO2, that is 1 ton of CO2. This ton of CO2 has a lot of bad impact and reverse impact on the environment. So you're investing in something that doesn't make a lot of sense from a holistic perspective, but it's 1 ton of CO2. This one is going to be very cheap. On the other hand, you have your native ecosystem. Your native ecosystem is going to be resilient because you have biodiversity. You're going to have like better water treatment, soil restoration, air restoration, and you're going to have a lot of animals and biodiversity, insect in this ecosystem that's going to participate and help around it, and even further, because you know that, for instance, forests will help water cycle on a continent perspective. So it's a very important aspect. So this ton of CO2 is going to help a lot of people, and it's way different. But the price for doing it is not exactly the same. So this is the problem behind many things. And for instance, in techno-based, you're going to have the permanency that is very, very interesting. You're going to have this guarantee. So I think it's something that is very important. You need to differentiate, and you need to understand what is behind your ton of CO2. And we also need some regulation on the market. Some project that doesn't have very good co-benefits or no co-benefits at all, or worse, should not be accepted on the market because it's absolutely deregulated. It's like if you had, it's like for instance, pharmaceutical industry. So you're gonna put some cheap generic that without any very good control on the market, whereas on the other side you have like high quality European medication, but that are triple the price. What are you gonna take for you? So
it's interesting what you're saying, because this relates to the biodiversity footprint of project, which is a matter which is, you know, biodiversity risk on top of transition risk and physical risk is being addressed more and more. So this could be coupled with the new advances we're making on evaluating the biodiversity footprint and evaluate its cost in a way to join to the cost of a specific project, whether it's eucalyptus forest or.
Yeah, on this point is very interesting because there's a lot of discussions on should we do like a biodiversity credit, because this is a very important topic. Biodiversity, it's a major risk. Even like carbon and biodiversity are like, we could say, equal, or even, well, maybe we are not going to classify, but both are very important. And like biodiversity so far is very not really addressed. And some people want to do biodiversity credit, but on the other hand, one thing is that, okay, we skip it with carbon credits that is already very difficult to establish, and we put on top biodiversity. So it would just be like part of the carbon market, and that would be very interesting. But anyway, I think we should really, like, everyone should understand, and maybe we should change the semantic to not just talk about carbon credit, because one carbon credit from the other is not the same thing, it's not the same story. And people need to see it, because otherwise you are thinking you are doing right, but it's absolutely the contrary. So it would be quite a shame.
Thank you. Okay, before we open to questions, I think Julien, do you have a last comment on the market price? Because I see there are a lot of participants and lots of questions, and I'd like to make sure we address them.
Yeah, no, well, very quickly for me, I'm gonna only focus on engineered carbon removal, permanent carbon removal. So Puro operates across 5 different methodologies. So a methodology is basically a set of rules that are applied to a project to determine its integrity. And we operate across 5 methodology. The most mature one, I would say, is biochar. And there, we're starting to see prices have come down a bit and are stabilizing. So, and they're just north of $100. When we talk about geologically stored carbon, so BECCS and DACCS, which is another activity that Puro will start certifying in 2024, prices are higher. And the reason for that is the machines are still in their infancy. The economies of scale haven't happened. The cost of capturing a marginal ton is just really high. But everyone in this market is working towards getting those costs down to significantly lower as to what they're now. So we have people who are currently producing at 200 that want to get to 50, and people producing at 400 that want to get to 100. And this is exactly what the buyers are buying today. They're not buying $400 a ton thinking they're going to continue buying $400 a ton for the next 20 years. They're paying $400 a ton today because they know that this has a huge impact into getting that exact same ton at $100 in 10 years. So this market is not basically living in a merry world where it thinks that those prices will be achieved at the scale required. It's betting today on economies of scale, of technical innovation, on a lot of work that will allow those tons, those very high quality tons, to be available to everyone at a economically sensitive price, basically.
Okay, thank you. Jediga, I see you raise your hand. Do you want to make a quick point? I really want to make sure we have at least 10 minutes for the questions.
Maximum 1 minute, Oli. Thank you. I just wanted to add one point. We cannot afford to have very bad quality on voluntary carbon market, we have an acceleration of interoperability between compliance market and voluntary market, like paying a carbon tax with carbon credit. So we cannot afford to have this contagion between bad quality and good quality. Otherwise, we will hamper the aim of compliance markets. And one other point in relation to what Adrien is mentioning is biodiversity credits and certificates are coming into the market, and we really need to, if we want to commercialize that kind of products, people really need to understand how it's the complexities of dealing with nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Jediga. So let's go to the question. Lisa. So I see Jay, you wanted to ask something, I guess. Would you?
I did. Can you hear me, Olivier?
Yeah, yeah. Hey,
It's
Jay,
nice to see you again. Good to see you too. So I'm an ESG consultant working with several companies, advising them on broader ESG strategy. But two of my clients, one a forestry management company in Uganda, another growing alfalfa in Senegal, are thinking of starting this process to verify the carbon sequestration from the farm and the forest, and obviously monetize this through generating and selling carbon credits. How do you suggest these companies or advise these companies to begin this process? How can it be made simple and straightforward, and obviously in the best interest of the planet?
Might be who wants to take that? Adrien might be next to your field.
Maybe I have two questions. So those forests are productive forests already on foot?
They're growing forests, so they're are you asking if they're already established or if they're recently planted?
Yeah, what type of forest is it? Is it like a productive forest that has been planted, or is it like native forest in which are like just taking some trees?
No, it's land that they've bought or leased from the Ugandan government and grown timber on to actually sell wood and generate returns through that. But they haven't really thought about monetizing the carbon sequestration.
But if you want my opinion on this, it should not be certified. It's not because you're already, it's a forest, productive forest. You are making money on it. It's a viable project, and in the end, it's not like a native ecosystem with real co-benefit for the environment. And this forest not gonna stand alone for centuries and centuries. So my point of view on this is like keep it to the normal way of business, but it's not for carbon industry.
And the alfalfa farm in Senegal?
The what? Alfalfa farm?
It's a type of grass, the growing.
Yeah, this I don't know. I would need to study a little bit better. Might be, but
I suppose the question is, if there are companies that are doing activities that are sequestering carbon, how do they go about beginning this process of verifying it in the best possible way and going through the right processes to issue carbon credits?
Your go to see certifiers.
So you need to find the right. You need to find the right certifier. I think that this is where also it's a complex thing for new entrant into that market. I believe, Adrian, but I'm happy to follow up and introduce you to Adrian if you want to speak further. Just to take a few more questions, I like the next one also on the list. How do we address I think Japet, sorry if I mispronounced, do you want to ask your question around the integrity of the demand? If you're still with us? Otherwise, let's just pick it. So this is a point you made, Jijiga. I think it's an interesting one about the integrity of the demand. I would have asked the same question, by the way. How do we address that? What can we do?
Yeah, what can we do? I think it's all about. I think it cannot be seen independently from the market, because it's part of the market. The demand is part of the market. So there is a regulation thing which is important. I think there is some countries coming with a regulation on voluntary market, which this is one point also highlighted by Adrien. We have also the market infrastructure, which is about registries, transparency, which is actually the alpha and the omega of the markets, and it's not there on carbon markets, unfortunately. And we should not treat it as a tangible commodity. There is a lot of work from the CFTC, the Chicago commodity market on that, which is interesting to review as well. And one other point, we have actually we need to think it broadly about if we see it as a liability, what should be actually offsetted. It's really important. We usually say we need to avoid, reduce, and offset. But what does it mean really? What is the residual emissions? We need to define collectively what is the residual emission. Which sectors are concerned? Should we develop net zero products? Does the net zero fit with a company or corporate, or is it? I don't think it's appropriate for a product. What is the scoping? Is it scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, etc.? Because there is only scope 1, which is going outside the atmosphere. It's important as well to which scope should we apply it. And as some of people are familiar with asset and liability management, why in the asset and liability management from the financial point of view, we have the maturity there and we don't have it on carbon. For example, I offset even today, I put 0, even if the positive side, my liability is still on the air and the offset is not there. So there is a lot of works from the accounting point of view on GHG protocol and carbon accounting, but I gave you just few topics here, but it can be really there is for example the Emission Liability Management Institute, who is doing a lot of work on that and trying to propose new methodologies.
If you can share a link through in the in-call messages,
yeah, sure.
about this
It's
institute,
really
I think
interesting.
it can benefit everybody. So another question about the carbon removal certification. I think you who wants to touch on that, and how does what is the context against the negotiation of the COP28 and the Article 6? How does this carbon removal certification framework from the European regulation come into play? Who wants to take that?
Yeah, maybe yes, Julien, please go ahead. Yeah, I think it's more on your. Thank you.
Yeah. So I understand the question is how related it is to Article 6. So, well, let me start with saying that so it's not related to Article 6. Article 6 is under the United Nations, so it's a agreement of all the parties, while the EU CRCF, the Carbon Removal Framework, is specific to the EU. What the EU CRCF does currently is assess methodologies that exist basically in the carbon removal space and contemplate whether the EU could come and take a regulatory role or a centralized role to arranging the carbon removal activities happening on the territory. So completely different from my Trickle 6, but another example of where the voluntary carbon market pioneers and then some intergovernmental bodies or regions build on that knowledge and centralize and bring maybe robustness or maybe scale to a specific piece of the carbon market ecosystem. It's still early stage, so we don't know exactly where it's going to go, how it will or will not interact with the EU ETS, so the exchange trading scheme, which is the emission quotas, which have been prevailing in the EU for 20 years now. But yeah, definitely, I mean, a step in the right direction to for the visibility of carbon removal and making sure that those activities happen at scale in our region.
If I might add, I think it's really an important process to follow up, as Julien mentioned. And as I mentioned also earlier, I think under Article 6.4 on the methodologies on CDR, for example, on CCS US, I think this, I think that the supervisory body will wait for the IPCC guidance on that. And I think also IPCC works will be linked to what is undergoing at the European level, which is really advanced, I think, on that. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question here, and maybe then I'll hand the mic to any other participant want to ask. From Francesco about the price difference in percentage between the ton of carbon from the eucalyptus forest you were mentioning, Adrian, and the let's say naturally preserved forest. I guess it's not in percentage, or yeah, I would say it's probably in multiples. But I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, I think it could go up to multiple, depends a lot, but multiple 15, multiple 20, or more.
Absolutely. So that shows how this part the prices. Do we have a last question from our participants here, because it's already almost 4 p.m. 3 p.m. UK time, and we've been over, but it's always a pleasure to have this discussion.
Olivier, question. It's a remark, or you can put it in a question. It appears that I'm on the subject since December, so I'm quite new on that subject. But there is something nobody mentioned. It's the fact that at the COP, IOSCO, we know all who is IOSCO, announced that they launched a 90 days, I think, consultation, where I am at the moment, we will reply to. And for me, it's a strong sign to the point of Julien mentioned, is that VCM is look at a growing.
Sorry, can you specify what the consultation is about?
The consultation is about outlining, if you want, a set of good practices in order to ensure the integrity of an orderly functioning of the VCM market, of the VCM. So saying all the things which I mentioned, the double accounting, the fact that you got plenty of registries, so you could have, it's great. Every fintech want to create their own registry and so on, and own market. So yeah, I mean, I can see that you're smelling business opportunities, which is great. But after it's a question, I'm sorry, it's coming to the boring part of what is a market. It's all the if I can say, post-trade world, and ensuring that having different repository is not an issue at proper interoperability and the kind of way to ensuring that we are not creating, double and things. So I think there are more to come, because we have spoken about the product, but that is a sign as well that there is a willingness, at least from the regulator, to regulate these markets. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. So do we have a question, last question or statement, maybe from you guys, if you have a last thought to share, Didier, Adrian, or Julien, you have 30 seconds each, let's put it like that.
Yeah, very quickly, Philippe, I think, I don't know if you are French, but actually I mentioned the registries, the market functioning, it's really important. I think you can go, if you are French, the French accounting ecosystem has done a lot of work on how to treat carbon markets from an accounting perspective and from market also perspective, and the Chicago commodity market as well, because they are used to treat intangible commodities. So I think it can help you. Thank you.
Julien, Adrien, last word of wisdom or thoughts here?
Yeah, just well, I don't know exactly who we have in front of us here, but presumably, I mean, this market is doing a huge amount of work towards integrity and towards better quality, and with initiatives everywhere towards that. What it needs is actual demand on a forward basis, and investors who are now today spending time to understand the economics, because opportunities are there for investment today, whether it's infrastructure projects, whether it is VC type investment into new technologies, whether it is prepayments, repaid in credits, etc. So I really engage, all the people listening to this webinar. How can I engage in this ecosystem? What's in there for me? Because there is definitely a lot for everyone, and I'm very happy to take follow-up discussions if you would like to get a closer engagement in the market.
Okay, thank you very much. And if you're open for offline communication, feel free to share your email, in the text. So that's your own prerogative in a way. Sorry, Adrien, do you want to say something?
No, but I think Jessica and Julien said already a lot. But I think I'm quite confident overall, seeing the work that has been done in such few years, and I think we have great perspective. But there are still many challenges, so it's time to address them. I also would be very happy to extend with you. You can reach me on LinkedIn without problem. And yeah, I'd just help some people learn some aspect today. And if you want to deep dive, with great pleasure.
Thank you. Seems that you had a lot of positive feedback already, and for me also it's a learning curve, and this was acceleration. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for our speakers to make time and educate our members and listeners. See you next month.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you, everyone.
everybody. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.
Um,